Good, everyone's happy. Excellent, excellent. That's a good start to the week. All right, today the Bureau of Meteorology came and briefed Cabinet about what we're to expect between now and the end of the year, but also we were given an update about how we will be prepared for bushfire season. Well, the good news is we're not expecting a big bushfire season, but we are expecting a wetter than normal spring. We're also heard from the Bureau, and you'll hear from Laura in a moment, that these conditions could be similar to the conditions that we saw over the summer this year. So we'll be monitoring things very carefully, and the next step that our government will be taking will be to talk to all of the mayors just to make sure that we're very well prepared and to see how everybody is going with the implementation of the recommendations from the last flooding event. So I don't want Queenslanders to get alarmed, but what we do want to see is people to be prepared. So we'll hear from the Bureau and we'll be monitoring things very carefully, but it's good we've got a heads up now, so early in the cycle, that we can do everything we can to prepare for a very wet spring leading into, once again, a wet summer. So I'll hand over to Laura from the Bureau. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Premier. Okay, so the message from the Bureau today is that we have seen above average rainfall in Queensland from May to July. So we've seen an above average winter for the past couple of months. And what that means is that instead of a drying trend that we would typically see in winter, we haven't seen any of the ground dry up across most of Queensland. So that means that the soil still remains quite moist and we can see flooding because of that. So that's what we have seen, and then in terms of the outlook, we're still expecting to see a wetter than average end to winter and as well as spring. So the two reasons that we're seeing this increased rainfall, we have two main climate drivers, so two factors that affect our climate. One is the Indian Ocean Dipole, and that's currently negative, and that indicates what we could see over winter and spring, and that's showing us that we're likely to see above average rainfall for winter and spring. And then our other climate factor is La Nina. So at the moment, the Bureau of Meteorology is in a La Nina watch, which means that we're more likely to see a La Nina this summer. And if we do see that La Nina, then we could expect to see a wet summer as well. So if we couple what we've seen in the winter, which has been a lot more moisture and grounds remaining wet and not drying up, with the forecast for an above average season, that means that we are gearing up for a season that could see quite a bit of flooding across Queensland. So in terms of the bushfire risk, that does decrease the bushfire risk because we're not seeing that drying out. However, it doesn't mean that we won't be seeing bushfires, and I'll hand over next to Commissioner at QFES to talk about what we can expect this bushfire season. But with the increased risk of flooding, we're really just encouraging communities to stay up to date with the forecast, the warnings, the climate outlooks across our app and on our website, and to follow the advice of emergency services as well.
I might go to Minister Ryan first.
Thanks very much, Laura and Premier, and thanks everyone for tuning in and the interest of the media, because these are very important safety messages. So we've just heard from the Premier and the Bureau around the possibility for a wetter than normal spring and a wetter than normal summer, which of course means that we have to be prepared. So people need to get ready for those types of weather behaviours and weather seasons and make sure that they are in the best possible position to keep them and their families safe. And of course, when it does start raining, if people do see flooding or flash flooding, to avoid entering floodwaters. If it's flooded, forget it. It's for your own safety. But we will shortly hear from the Fire Commissioner as well about the bushfire season. Now, there is still a bushfire risk, notwithstanding the wet year that we have had. So although we will see probably a normal bushfire season and the chances of forest bushfire being reduced, there is still a higher than normal chance around grass bushfire. So for people in the north and central and west, there is still a significant chance for you to experience grass fire, and of course you then need to be prepared for that season. So make sure you have your bushfire plan, make sure you check on your neighbours to make sure they're prepared, and please keep engaged with your local rural fire service about the warnings and the mitigation activities that you need to be engaged with, and do it now. We are heading into the bushfire season. Queensland Fire and Emergencies Services has been doing that mitigation work and that preparation work already. The large air tanker is about to arrive in the early weeks of September, as well as also the contracts in place around our aerial firefighting fleet. And we've also got rural fire brigades engaged right across the state, engaged in mitigation activities. So please everyone, pay attention to the warnings from the Bureau and the Queensland Fire and Emergency Services, and be ready for the next natural disaster season.
Just a quick question, Minister, while I was waiting there. I know you talked about last year, you said anyone who loots at flood home is a grub. We saw some people recently get sentenced for looting Queenslanders' flood homes, only get community service orders. Is that a concern that those sentences are so light?
Well, whatever the penalty, can I firstly commend the Queensland Police Service for apprehending those offenders and also doing the proactive policing work which minimised the opportunity for looters to engage in that grubby behaviour. It is grubby. And whatever the penalty, those offenders have brought shame on themselves and shame on their families. And they really need to reflect on their behaviour and think about their life choices, because it is disgusting, grubby behaviour, and they ought to be ashamed of their behaviour.
And lastly, are you concerned about the car theft stats that have just come out, with the number of car thefts across Queensland?
Yeah, well, any level of criminal offending is obviously of concern. Even one instance of criminal offending is of concern because it's so personal to the person who's impacted by that offending. So that's why the government's taken extra steps over the last few years to toughen up our bail laws and to also strengthen the Queensland Police Service with extra resourcing. And we make a big commitment to the Queensland people, and that is we will do whatever it takes to continue to keep them safe and to make their communities even safer.
The Bureau of Meteorology is forecasting a wetter than average spring and start to summer this year, but Queenslanders shouldn't be complacent about the bushfire risk. Our modelling still shows that we're likely to experience a normal bushfire season this year. And whilst we're unlikely to see the extensive bushfires such as we saw in 2018-19, we are going to see significant grass fire activity in some parts of the state. The recent rain that we've had has brought on a significant amount of grassland growth right around through western, central and southern parts of Queensland, and the frosts that we've seen in recent weeks has dried off much of that vegetation and it'll be ready to burn in the coming weeks and months. So our rural fire brigades have been out working with their local communities undertaking hazard reduction burns. So far we've conducted over 133 burns and have burnt an area of nearly 60,000 hectares. And we're doing that in locations where we most need to keep communities safe. But we can't do it alone. We need all Queenslanders who own properties to take responsibility for their bushfire risk. Now's the time to start cleaning up around your properties and try and keep your properties safe this upcoming season.
Any questions for Laura?
Just on the increased flooding risk, is that for people whose homes have flooded earlier this year, should they be expecting the chance that their homes will flood again this summer?
So in terms of the outlook, it really indicates to us, sorry, I'll take that again. In terms of the outlook, it really indicates to us that all of Queensland should be aware that we are expecting increased chance of seeing above average rainfall this season. So there's not any specific locations that we can point out in the outlook. It's really broad brushed and it does cover quite a large part of Queensland. So in terms of those communities that were specifically affected last year, we can't pinpoint exactly where we would see events, so it's really difficult to drill down to that level of detail, just sort of keeping it broadly that all of Queensland should be across the fact that we are expecting to see quite a bit of rainfall this spring and summer.
Okay, any other questions?
Premier, why should Queenslanders, taxpayers, fund Jackie Tradd's legal action to keep a CCC report secret?
Look, we've addressed these issues. There's legal indemnity that apply to both sides of
There's nothing in
politics.
the legal guidelines, in the indemnity guidelines, that prohibit you telling what the cost is.
Well, the matters haven't been finalised, so how will we have the final cost?
You still have a month-by-month
Okay,
cost.
we've been through this over and over again. There's legal indemnity that apply to both sides of politics. Are there any other questions?
The guidelines say that special approval must be given in writing from the Attorney General. Do you know why this approval was given?
Oh, you have to ask the Attorney General.
But surely, you're the head of the government, you must know why that approval was given.
They're legal indemnity guidelines, and the legal indemnity guidelines were followed.
No, but
Okay.
they don't say anything about why the
I've
costs
addressed
can't be
all of
revealed.
these matters time and time again. Are there any other questions before I go to
Premier,
caucus?
in terms of
No, I've
transparency,
addressed.
in terms of transparency though, why can't Queenslanders know the legal bills so
There
far?
are legal bills that are
and why there was
associated with
special approval
former
given?
ministers as well that have applied for decades. Okay?
There are, but in
All
this,
right.
in this specific instance, taxpayer dollars are being used
If
to
there
keep
are
a
no
triple
other
C.
questions, I'll go to caucus. If there are any other
The
questions, I'm
taxpayer
happy to
dollars are
take
being
them.
used to keep a triple C report secret.
No, it's
and-
not. That's not correct, Tim. It's
Well,
not
it is.
correct. That's
No,
not. No, that's factually incorrect.
Well, explain to us what the
That's
use of these
factually-
taxpayer dollars.
that's-
These taxpayer dollars are going to
That's
fund Jackie
factually
Tradd's.
incorrect.
They are going to fund Jackie Tradd's legal case to keep the triple C report suppressed.
Okay.
That's
Any
what
other
that's about.
questions?
Premier, how
I'm
is
not-
that incorrect?
I'm not commenting on court cases.
Then
Okay.
how is that
But
incorrect?
it's only.
And neither should anyone here in the media be commenting on court cases. If there are no other questions,
It's
I'm going to
only-
caucus. Anything else?
It's only a
Lydia?
court case because the funding is actually is coming from the taxpayers to help it go before court.
Any other questions?
Have you finished reading the Court of Appeal decision on Peter Cullen?
No, not yet. No, I've been reading the Fitzgerald one, if that's okay.
In terms.
All right.
I was going to say, would you drink recycled water?
Look, if the experts say it's safe, of course I would.
And just on the Fitzgerald
Yes.
report, was that considered by Cabinet today? And was
Yes,
there
it
any-
was, and it was all adopted in principle, as I said it would be the other week, which is great. There are some recommendations there for the Triple C that they will look at, and I'm very glad that the report was commissioned, and I'll be speaking to caucus about it today.
Any apology for the councillors who were sacked?
Let me say very clearly in relation to that, and that's a very good question. The charges were brought by the Triple C, and the report was the councillors were dismissed because they did not have quorum under the Act. Okay?
Can you just tell us where it is in the indemnity guidelines that say that costs can't be made public? Now?
They've applied to both sides of politics for many, many years.
But where in the guidelines?
Okay,
So just-
we're repeating. If there's any other
On
questions?
their apology to the councillors, some of them have asked for that from the state government in the Triple C, so why can't the state government do that?
Because it's not for the state government.
They were sacked under your laws.
No, under the Act, they were dismissed because they could not meet a quorum of the council. They are the laws. You can't meet the quorum of the council.
Government introduced though.
Well, correct, and that applies to all councils across the state.
Do you think they're entitled to compensation?
That's a matter for them. Okay, thanks everyone. Great start to the week. See you all later.